18th at 4 o'clock is the due date, and all materials can be found at our Dollar website. This is our technical assistance call, but as you know, questions can be asked to your education program specialist until the due date.
Remember to mute your phones. If you want yourself on camera, that's fantastic, but if you don't want yourself on camera, you can click the little camera icon so it has an X through it, and you will not be on camera. Some of you are, some of you aren't, so I just wanted to let you know that you are on camera, and we can see you, but you can't see us. Also, use the chat box for any questions, and we ask that you sign in the chat box with your name and your institution. So if you could take a minute and do that. Some of you have already started. Thank you very much. Oh.
Okay, so for our technical assistance agenda, we're going to do some welcome and introductions so that you know who's in the room here at Dollar. And we're going to cover what's new in the continuation application from NEDP, professional learning, AEFL, the language access plan, performance measures. After that, we'll open the floor to questions. We'll also cover many of the questions that were asked via email to Danette.
Remember, please, to mute your phone. Please mute. Thank you.
So we'll go around the room. This is Ellen Beatty.
Helen Coop.
Melissa Zarvos. Grayla Renault.
Lauren Gilwey.
Terry Gilliland.
Bio Aditsunji.
We're going to turn it over to Bio for what's new in NEDP.
Well, good morning again, everyone. This is Bio again. Basically, I just wanted to touch on one of the new items on the continuation application that you probably already are familiar with. And that's the requirements that all NEDP clients will need to basically provide a government-issued photo ID prior to enrollment. The purpose of that photo ID is for the students to be able to verify their identity and establish Maryland residency. And I also wanted to mention that this is not something that is entirely new. It's something that is already in place at DLLR, but it will now be implementing NEDP. The ID that is that we actually accept will be the MBA ID, and primarily will be the MBA, any ID that is issued by the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration, military IDs. In your NEDP assurances page or pages, you will find a list of other acceptable IDs. So the other reason that we're pointing this out is to kind of determine what the local program needs to do. Basically, you need to inform your NEDP clients during the intake process so that they are aware that this requirement is in place. And you need to ensure that your NEDP clients present an acceptable ID prior to program entry, meaning during the diagnostic phase. At this point, I should mention that when the students come in and they're taking their pre-assessment, at that point, some of them do not know whether they're going to be accepted into the NEDP program. That wouldn't be a requirement at that point, but you should let them know that at the event that they would like to participate in the NEDP program, they will need to provide an ID. And also you will need to keep a copy of that photo ID with other documents in the client's folder. And also a copy of the ID needs to be submitted to DLLR once the student, the NEDP client has completed the program and they're requesting a diploma. As well, all documentation submitted to Dollar, including all those documents, and they're listed on the screen. They should match, and they should match the client's name on the picture ID. Perhaps some people may have a question about students, NEDP clients that are currently enrolled before this guidance came into effect. All clients who are currently enrolled must also provide a photo ID before they are issued a diploma. And if a student has gone through a name change before their diploma is issued, they also need to submit documentation and be issued a new photo ID while they're enrolled. I'm sure this probably generated a lot of questions, but if you have any questions regarding the new policy, I wanted to say that it's not anything that something that we had been thinking about, but CASAS also introduced this requirement in the NEDP policy and procedure manual that was released in February of this year. So I don't know if there are any questions regarding this.
There is a question in chat.
Too, actually.
We have a couple. The first one is, we don't have to obtain IDs from GED students. Why is this necessary for NEDP students?
If the NEDP client, regarding the GED testing, actually when CASAS implemented this procedure, when they included this in the manual, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We basically repeated everything that is being done at with GED testing. When a GED student is about to take the test, they need to indicate that yes, they are Maryland residents, and they need to provide a copy of their ID before they take the test. Now remember that the NEDP is not a test, but at the time that they're going through an assessment and they are being issued a Maryland high school diploma, we need to be able to verify their identity and also establish their Maryland residency. Now with the GED student, because you're kind of preparing them to take the test, it's not on you, it's not on the local program to verify their identity. But when they're taking the test, which is equivalent to the GED, going through the GED assessment, they need to provide an ID.
We have another question too. For students currently enrolled, this was not a requirement prior. What if they have paid for and completed the program and do not have a photo ID?
Then you will need to basically, the list of IDs that are required are provided in the NEDP assurances. If the student is not able to, I'm thinking that you were thinking, if the student is not able to obtain a Maryland MBA ID, there are other picture IDs that they can submit. And if you check the assurances, you will see a list of the other IDs that are acceptable.
Okay. On to Melissa.
Now for professional learning, we're going to hit a few of the changes and the things that might look a little bit different from previous years. For the professional learning, there is a workbook that is separate from the grant application. It is 3 charts and 1 plan. So chart 1 is called Learning Topics, and it's a result from surveys of staff need and staff staff needs. So if you have been doing needs assessment of your staff for the last couple of years, which we hope that you have, you can use that data to fill in that chart. Chart 2 is data from observation. So this is results from instructor observations that you have conducted in your programs. And again, it's just not last year's data. It can be prior year's data that you are collecting to feed your professional learning. So the results from instructor data, observation data is on chart 2. And then chart 3 is your program outcome data. So your LACES data, your completions, information that you have gathered from all of your LACES charts and things like that. These charts need to be completed and submitted with the grant application in May. Once they're submitted with the grant application, we will review them, and then we will tell you to start planning for your professional learning. The chart for professional learning is coming up. And it looks sort of familiar, but sort of different. We've added a few things. It's in an Excel spreadsheet to help you calculate costs. It also has a place to refer to your data that was collected in the prior 3 charts. and a few new columns like target dates, and if you are planning on doing some online coursework or providing online coursework to your instructors, there's a facilitator or title or course name column, and also costs that are attached to those things. So in order to think ahead, to think that about bringing people in or attending conferences or courses, to calculate that and budget for that. So that's what just the name of the activity, the total hours, target dates, target participants, and all of your other information that will impact your budgeting when it comes to planning for your local professional learning. Back to the planning. This chart, while we want to review your needs assessment and charts 1, 2, and 3, that doesn't mean you can't start planning your professional learning while we're reviewing. So you're using your data, estimated budgets, estimated cost, estimated amount of teachers that you're going to have. Everything we do is sort of a well estimated situation so that you can plan your budget accordingly. And then we have a documentation and reporting section. So all of your staff, state and local professional learning, that's being paid for by PD dollars from this grant. So nothing that is not being paid for by PD dollars from this grant needs to be entered in LACIS. We will have more information in the future on training for those folks that don't know how to do the LACIS data entry and all of that kind of detailed logistic stuff. But we want all of the professional learning to be entered in LACIS so that we have a record of it and we can track it. And then we also want to continue uploading your documentation to SharePoint. For each professional learning event, there is one PDF. There will be one single PDF that includes an agenda, the sign-in sheet, and the professional learning evaluation form, which I've attached a link to in the application, and that has cost on it. It has facilitator name. It has some new information. So please take a look at that as you're going through your professional learning planning. Remember that all materials that are developed with dollars, we have to be identified as the funding source. So this professional learning was supported with funds from Department of Labor Licensing Regulation and that full spiel. And then when you are uploading into SharePoint, we are trying to implement a naming convention that is consistent across programs. So this is the naming convention for each uploaded event or activity. It's the title, it's the event title, month and year, no dots, no spaces, no dashes. There's an example there. So CASAS, September 2018. What we don't want to see is something like fall staff meeting. We really want to be able to identify what the topic of the professional learning is by the title, because we receive so many uploads. We need to be able to look at it at a glance to see what people are doing. So just a brief look, this is what the new form looks like. So it's got some information that may look familiar, but also some information that is new. So to record the rationale for the professional learning activity and some of the reflection from the staff from evaluations, and then the evaluation of the event objectives and any comments from participants. We still have to do this for every event, and we have to have a compilation of evaluations, not a single individual evaluation from each participant. It's just too onerous for us to go through. So again, this is all in the grant. I'm happy to take any questions on this, either on this call or later if you have any questions to follow. Let's see, I gotta get to the chat box now. We have one question. Jason, is that effective immediately? Is that the ID situation or the professional learning? we'll hold off. We'll start IELTC and wait for the ID situation. Yes.
It is.
Yes. Yes. Jason, the answer is yes. It's effective immediately with the photo IDs.
Good morning, this is Grayla. Just wanted to present just a little bit about the IELCE, IET. So we presented this as a separate document to the grant, and it only pertains to those programs who had received initial funding in FY18 in the RFP grant. So programs who received that initial fundings are welcome to opt out of receiving the continuation funds for this line. If you have looked at this program and you do not feel that it is appropriate for you, you don't have to continue. Programs must have an adequate English language learner population in order to support this implementation of the program. And then we also want you to keep in mind that if you are offering the WIOA 243 IELCE IET program, you have to offer that in combination with an IET. So with your IET for this funding line, it also has to be in combination with an IELCE. You should make sure that your participants are work eligible, because that is one of the focuses of this post-secondary education, and also getting them into career pathways. You need to make sure that your IET is for a specific occupation or occupational cluster, and you should be working with your local and state workforce development boards. You need to ensure that this is part of a career pathway, and you need to also look at establishing cross-agency partnerships. For use of the funding, mostly it should go for instruction, and you can also do support services, okay? If you have questions about what those things mean, feel free to contact me. My contact information is in the RFA, so you can call me, you can email me, we can chat about any questions you would have about what instruction includes and what support services includes. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box or to contact me after this session.
Before we get to Lauren, we had one question on assurances and one question on PD. So the question for assurances was, will the assurances be updated and sent out to programs to amend for this year?
I would say no. We're getting ready to go into the new grant year. We won't be amending it.
And from Brandy, does PD form have to be submitted for every webinar that teachers participate in? For example, we sometimes only have 1 or 2 teachers take a co-ed webinar. So as much as you can put those all together in one form by multiple titles and multiple people, that would be fine. We can talk more about that later. We don't want you individually doing one for each person, but their participation in co-ed webinars or webinars of that nature need to be entered into LACES so we can keep track of what people are doing, and to make sure that we know where people are going. If you're not paying for people to participate in those webinars, then you don't have to fill out any form. So just keep in mind, this is tracking mostly for the things that are being paid for. We have another question about performance trends and projections that we will be answering. So Carol, we see your question. This is the question about performance trends and projections. We'll be addressing that later on, just in a few seconds on this call. Okay, Lauren.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Lauren Gilby, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're implementing our language access plan and what we're hoping to see in terms of responses when you work on your continuation. So the next slide. Perfect. So we included 4 items for you to respond to in the RFA, and these are really based on work we did with the language access plan last fall that a lot of you contributed to. So the first item is about explaining how your organization works to promote equitable interaction with those who have limited English proficiency. So this will, of course, be especially important to sites that are serving a lot of English language learners. We also want to learn about how your organization is assessing individuals. We want you to tell us about how you're going to identify vital documents and what you're going to do to translate them. And then finally, we want to hear about what you're doing with oral interpretation services. So for your reference, the Language Access Plan is available on our website. This is not the adult education page, however. So if you go to Dollar's website and click Jobs at the top, the left side menu will have the adult education link, but there's also one for WIOA. Once that page comes up, there are a bunch of links there to a lot of the items from our January convening that I know a lot of you attended, and you can actually get to the Language Access Plan from there, and the URL is also available for you. So basically what I've done on this next slide is taken the 4 items that we're asking you to respond to in the RFA and actually kind of laid out a reference for where you could look in the Language Access Plan to try to, sort of determine what we're looking for in terms of what we may be holding you accountable to in the future. So the first item is really about how you're promoting that equitable interaction. And I would suggest that you look at pages 8 and 10 in the Language Access Plan. This is where we list some of Dollar's current promising practices and also some of the resources that we have available. I think a lot of similar items may exist at your sites, and this would be a good place to mention them. Talk about how you collect information. Are you asking people? Are they recording it somewhere? Do you have something like an Office of Fair Practices or an Equal Opportunity Office at your site? And how do they support folks with limited English proficiency? Are you already using some translated materials, or do you have something available on your website that's in a language other than English? I would consider the examples that we've used in our Language Access Plan and then think about how they might be applicable to your location. The second item from the RFA is about assessing individuals. If you refer to page 26 of the Language Access Plan, you're going to see a list of the assessments that you are regularly using. So this will be a place to say which tests you currently use, but then also if you're using any other strategies to identify individuals with limited English. That could be, do you have something posted on a wall when somebody enters your site that's in various languages that they can point to and identify what their native or preferred language might be? That's something that we see a lot in WIOA's Title I and III in the American Job Centers. But if you have something like that at your location, this is a great opportunity to tell us about it. The third item regarding vital documents, this is sort of a robust section of the Language Access Plan and an area that we've gotten a lot of questions about. So if you refer to page 23 of the plan and then some of the subsequent pages, you're going to find out how to identify a vital document, and then we want you to tell us what you think those are, and then also how you plan to determine which languages to translate them into. I would encourage you, if you're not sure, to have your MIS maybe look into some of your LACES data or reach out to staff here to pull what the most common languages were at your site in recent years. You certainly can depend on American Community Survey or US Census Bureau data, but it might be more meaningful for some of your locations to actually pull info on the student population that's visiting you for services. And I'm certainly helpful or available to help with that if necessary. The last item that we want you to focus on is how you're planning to deliver oral interpretation services. Head to page 19 of the Language Access Plan and look into how those services can actually be delivered. This is a great opportunity to talk about multilingual staff that you've hired and which languages they speak and why you think that that's appropriate for your area of the state. We also want to hear about how you are utilizing certified interpreters, or how you plan to begin utilizing certified interpreters. Are you going to look into telephone interpretation? Are you going to work with a certified interpretation vendor? Are you planning to certify some of your staff? So if there are any questions about this, I am always happy to help and to be a resource. Additionally, I would really suggest lep.gov for additional questions. It's a federal interagency site that has a lot of information, some of which we used when we were drafting the language access plan. So please reach out, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or later.
Okay, so we have a few questions.
Okay.
Going back to PD and probably going into language access. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's start for the cost. To my knowledge, in LACES there is no spot for money, so there's no place to enter it. So that needs to be kept track separately from the tracking information in LACES. And I'll let you know if that changes, but to my knowledge, that is not happening. So will Dollar offer regional professional development? We are planning now, so we will keep you posted on the next year's professional development, and hopefully with enough time for you to plan all that you need. So as far as regional professional development to reduce travel costs and costs for part-time instructors, our intention is to limit the state professional development for instructors and focus on leadership teams. So if that helps you think about how you're budgeting your time and money. Is it true, no, Lauren, is it true that we're not supposed to use bilingual staff to translate vital documents?
Yes, so if you have a bilingual or multilingual staff member who is not certified, they should not be translating vital documents. If you look in the plan, it's going to help you, recognize which documents are vital and which ones aren't. So if a student is signing something, it is a vital document. If you have a Spanish-speaking staff member that wants to help you make a flyer that say clases en inglés, then that's fine. But you really should not be utilizing them where it's something that a student has to agree to or sign. That is where we need to have a certified translation service come in, or you need to have a certified staff member. So it's really up to each site to determine how they want to handle that.
Great. So this is a next question is, will Dollar translate LACES enrollment forms and distribute to programs?
Okay, yes. So what we are going to do this coming fiscal year is identify some of our common languages, potentially amend the LACES form so that it is easily translated into other languages, and then we will distribute those. But that is something that we're looking at, and that is the plan. We do have plans to do that.
Great. Yes, the PowerPoint will be made available. I was already going to say that. So thank you for reading my mind. A copy of the PowerPoint will go out to everybody. Is there funding for translation services?
So right now, I think that these RFA responses are going to help us see what sites are planning to do and how they want to handle translation and interpretation. We, in the next fiscal year, may look at supporting some initial services. However, if it is an internal document to you that you have students complete, that isn't something that is in a Dollar file that is monitored, we would likely not be assisting with that. And any assistance that we would provide would just be initial to get this rolling, but it is something that sites are going to have to be able to handle on their own in the near future.
All right. Until the next set of questions.
So let's turn our attention to performance measures. I want to talk about a change to the process. In the past, the programs created targets, and then you negotiated those targets with your education program specialist. This year, we're going to have a new process. We're going to provide you with performance target recommendations, and then you're going to have the opportunity to discuss those targets with your program specialist. Our recommendations will be based on past performance, continuous improvement, and our state performance requirements. Negotiations with Octave from our side of the house will happen the last week of April. So you can expect a letter detailing the process and your performance trends and projections template, probably May 1st.
Okay. All right, let's go to the chat box and see what we have. I think there's another language access. So if a LACES form is translated, say, in Korean, will local programs be required to have a staff person that understands Korean to enter the student information in LACES?
Okay, so that's a really great question, and it's something that we have thought of. So in looking at the LACES form, what we'll have to do in order to make it translation friendly is so that all responses can be like checked or ticked off, because we're certainly not going to be able to expect your MIS to then take something, read Korean, translate it back into English, and put it into LACES. So we would have to set something up with the form to make sure that everything is a selection, and then the forms would actually not just be solely in Korean, they would be in English and Korean, so that both staff and the student would be able to understand them. This is probably going to extend the length of the document. And it also might mean for sites who then take our LACES form and sort of mold it into their own form, if we're going to, put in this extra effort, you might want to reconsider using that form. So that'll be kind of up to everybody to decide, but if we're offering it, it might be a good resource to use. So as we're doing that editing, we will definitely ask for input so that you might, decide to use that form as opposed to recreating it.
We have a question. Do you want me to read it? Define paraprofessional.
Where do we have
Teachers, assistants.
Yeah, it's teachers assistants. The same definition as the school systems. Teachers assistants, help in the classroom, those types of functions. Did the state ever complete the high school withdrawal confirmation form for entry into an ABE program?
I do not believe that has been completed. I think it's over with the legal office, and we hope to have it soon, but I know Ramona has been working on that with them.
All right.
We do have some other questions that came in, so we'll go through those, and if you have other questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. On the schedule of classes, what coding would ABE multi-level classes have? Depending on what levels you're serving in your multi-level, it could be ABE 1 to 4, ABE 5, 6, whatever would make sense for that class. Is there a threshold for determining what languages need to be translated?
Yes, so there is a state law about this, and this is listed in the language access plan, and there is a percentage assigned to an area. It's a 3% population for that region. Most likely you would want to look at the county or the city that you live in. The suggestion with this would be that is what you absolutely would be required to have on hand. So for instance, if you live in a county where the population is 5% Spanish speaking, you should have vital documents on hand in Spanish. If you know that you also have a large number, that's probably around 3% of your school population coming that speaks Arabic, but Arabic may not be 3% of the county, my suggestion would be that you still look into preparing those documents. Take a look at your census data, take a look at your LACES data, and maybe think about doing like a top 3 to 5 of the languages that you see, just so that you are prepared. But the actual legal requirement is 3% for your area, and that is in the language access plan.
And school system data.
So that would work too.
Yeah.
The second 3 questions have to do with professional development, many of which may have already been answered in Melissa's presentation. But there's a question to define who is the professional learning team members. And the response to that is it's your leadership team and others who might be involved in the professional development initiatives.
So anybody who's involved in planning, facilitating, or evaluating the local program professional learning, no matter whether they're full or part-time. So that doesn't make a difference in this instance, because we know a lot of your professional learning folks are not full-time with programs.
Okay, I think these next three have been answered. In terms of budgeting for professional development, our budgets that we develop for the new grants are projections only, and you should estimate based on providing each teacher with 8 hours of professional development. If you find that your budget needs to change during the course of the year, you can always do a budget amendment. And remember, if you put your professional development expenses on your literacy works line, you will not have them count towards your administrative cap. The box for GEPA does not expand beyond page 1. Is there a page limit for this exhibit? We've noticed in looking at last year's grants that really that's all the space that's needed for that. If you have an exception to that, perhaps you can check with your program manager, but usually that space is adequate. Directions indicate not to change the format of any of the exhibits. We noticed different font size and type in the answer boxes from the question boxes. Want to make sure that was the intention. And I think that if you do see that, it may be because some of the forms had to be adapted to make them fit. But
the narrative should all be in Times New Roman 11. Many of the charts are in Times New Roman 10. So if you see that change, just leave it. If you find something that's not in Times New Roman, please change to that.
The next question I think was already answered about performance measures, so I'm going to go on to the compulsory age statement. It is true that we will also follow the exceptions provided to the minimum age of 18. So if you do have someone who meets one of those compulsory age exceptions, they may be admitted to your program. The next one again is performance, and the next one is about NEDP assurances. And I think question 11 really is probably a particular case, and I would recommend that you contact Bio to discuss this because it is not a general question, it's a specific question. Okay, section 1, page 1.3, regarding the implementation on July 1st with NEDP students being Maryland residents. If we are currently serving students outside of Maryland, are we allowed to continue until they complete, or will we be required to exit them from the program? I don't think we're serving any out-of-state residents, but would appreciate this information clarified.
Essentially, we shouldn't be serving out-of-state students because they're obtaining a Maryland high school diploma after completing the program requirements. So we shouldn't be serving out-of-state students. But if this were to be the situation, I'd appreciate just give me a call. We'll be happy to take a look at it on a case-by-case basis. Because our funding is for Maryland residents primarily.
Clarification for requests for laptops. We're a program that uses all internet-based testing. We're growing to serve agencies in our community and sometimes must use the paper pencil version. Would this be a justification for requesting 5 to 8 laptops? Computer purchases are not allowable under the grant unless for MIS functions or for Best Plus. So the answer to that would be no, that would not be a permissible expense. Section page 23, is it appropriate to request funding in addition to last year's funding lines to provide support for achieving an acceptable plan for LAP? To our knowledge at this point, we are level funded, so anything that you provide in your grant will need to be covered by your current funding levels. Okay, the next one I think is also something that probably needs to be discussed with a program manager about a need for a new staff member, but I think my previous answer is going to apply for this as well. We have level funding, and any changes in your program will need to be supported by your current funding levels. Per the new NEDP assurances, Is it mandatory for all current NED? I think we answered this already about the identification, so I'm going to move on. The new sick and safe leave policy, how will this impact grants? What is allowable? If you're required to provide insurance, and sick leave, rather, you will need to do that with your grant funds. Are any parts of the PD document due when the grant is due? And I think Melissa answered that, parts 1, 2, and 3.
Charts 1, 2, and 3.
Right. And Grayla, I think you have answered this, but it's for section 243 IELCE, what kind of data do we need to provide?
The data that I'm asking for is that you have the English language learner population to support the program.
So the number of students enrolled.
Yes.
Okay, listed in the local plan, job postings, or can we just state that we owe a core partners? Well, I think she answered that question. So.
And then there's a request to go back to question 14.
Okay. Oh, yes, that was skipped over. Thank you. It appears that we now have T1, T2, T3, a midterm and an end of the year report. We will now have 5 reporting times. No, this I think was an error. We will have the 3 trimester reports and 2 financial reports due. And that's all that we're requiring. Is there anything that anyone would like to ask at this time?
So if there are further questions, they can be addressed to the program specialists as you come along, and then we will hopefully, share those answers with everybody.
And if you have questions about professional development, Melissa and Grayla will answer IELCE questions.
There are a few questions coming in. It's all about wait time, folks. All right. So can computer equipment be paid out of local funds?
We have allowed the purchase of computers with your matching funds.
Okay.
Are there any updates to the funding estimates?
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Terry. So as those who've been around for a while know, the General Assembly approves the state funding as submitted in the governor's budget. And the state funding was flatlined for this year, which quite honestly, we claimed victory with that because we were one of the only offices within the division as well as one of the only offices within DLLR as a whole that was level funded. So that's a good thing for us. The federal funding line item that's in the governor's budget that the General Assembly approves is an estimate based on what they expect to have happen, and they have flatlined that for us. That being said, we did receive last year from the federal government about a $300,000 decrease over the prior year. That wasn't substantial for us, but again, it is impactful. I've already budgeted for the same, a decrease of $300,000. Now, please know that the $30 million additional funding that was offered as part of the congressional negotiations is actually for the next fiscal year, the next federal fiscal year. So that $30 million additional funding that we expect to get is not going to be recognized in the federal funds that we're getting this year. So all of that being said, the simplest answer that I have for you right now is, stay tuned. We expect Octay is about a month delayed in providing the federal funding estimates that we're projected to have starting July 1. That's beyond our control. That's impacting every state in the country. But as soon as we do get the estimated numbers, we will share those. That's a public document, and certainly we'll share that. But at this time, I'm still estimating a slight decrease over last year, similar to what we did with the prior fiscal year as well.
Hang on a second, I gotta scroll back. There's, what agency certifies translators?
Okay, so the state has 3 official vendors for foreign language interpretation and translation services. They're all listed in the language access plan. We have a vendor for oral interpretation, for written translation, and for telephone interpretation. Schreiber is the one that the state has procured for written translation. So basically the way that they work is you send them a document in English, tell them what language you want it translated into, and they will do it for a fee. Community colleges, public libraries, they're all able to access the state's procured contract. What you would need to do is contact our Department of Budget and Management and get access to that contract. In terms of interpreters, if you are looking to actually certify your staff, to like have them go to a training, while we at the state can't necessarily recommend any place, there is only one place that I'm aware of in Maryland that is actually doing that. And they are cross-cultural communications in Columbia, and then there are additionally some places that are available online. But if you want to have more of a conversation about that, whoever asked that question, please reach out to me.
That's Patty. Okay, Regina, we see your question about the social work interns. If you could maybe just talk to Grayla, and then we can figure out what the question is more specifically, and we can address it. That would be great. There's a sick and safe leave question. Sick and safe leave, I understand it's allowable to pay out of the grant, which means it would have to cancel classes rather than pay a substitute. Has dollar anticipated any effect on performance as it relates to the delayed time in student achieving hours on post-testing, etc.?
It's the law, and we have to abide by it. I don't know what else to say, really.
Yeah, and budget for substitutes, should that
Right.
support what's going on, but compliance with the law is what we have to adhere to. A question, when will the infrastructure amounts be announced?
Same as I just said, we are waiting on our federal funding allocation estimates, and as soon as those funds are made available, we'll announce that. Many of your Title I partners have already been in contact with us, with me in particular, and I've shared the same thing with them.
I think
Does the funding decrease, where'd that go? Impact RSA with Title I?
Resource sharing agreements.
I would, this is Lauren, I would actually say, as your local area is revamping their plan this summer, to connect with them to talk about, if you're seeing some sort of decrease or if you're at a flatline amount, how they want to work that partnership with you. That would really be on an individual area basis.
Elaine, I'm going to recommend that we have a conversation. I see you have more questions about the sick and safe leave. Perhaps we can.
So does Kim.
Okay. Really, I think all we're saying is that if the law requires you to pay it, you're going to have to make a decision about whether you use substitute teachers and whether you can afford substitute teachers and to pay them that leave. Brianna, does Dollar recognize United Way Live United translation services as certified? Their services are free.
Off the top of my head, I would say no, probably not, but I'd be happy to look into it. Right now, what we are really using as a baseline is the vendor agreements by the state. But if you have other suggestions, I'm happy to look at them on a case-by-case basis. Can you tell me who asked that question?
Brianna from Carroll County.
Thanks.
Any other questions at this point? I'll give a little time. We will be sending out this PowerPoint. This is also recorded, so you'll be getting the recording. The recording will be made accessible also in the Google Drive with all the others. So, oh, see. One more question. Would it be possible for you to provide a Q&A summary? Yes, we will also.
The ones that were sent.
The questions that were sent in ahead of time, we will send out with the PowerPoint with the answers.
Although it is also recorded.
It is also recorded, but if you want paper, we will forward you paper as well. So those will also be available, and we could probably share them in some capacity. So if there are no more questions, we're heading up to 11:30, so that looks good. And we're happy to address any questions as they come along when you're filling out your application. We thank everybody for participating. And we will for sure hear from you soon. Everybody have a good day and a good week.
Can you scroll down that list?
Mm-hmm.